When I first saw the house on Wisteria Lane, it felt like a dream. A big Victorian structure, nestled under tall, whispering trees, with a wraparound porch and ivy crawling up the walls. It looked like something out of an old photograph. After years of apartment living and saving, I finally had a place of my own. A fresh start, I thought. I moved in on a cold, drizzly Friday. The movers didn't stay long. They unloaded everything quickly and seemed eager to leave. One of them, a stocky guy with tired eyes, looked at the house, then at me, and muttered, "Hope you sleep well tonight." I thought it was a joke. I laughed awkwardly. He didn't laugh back. By evening, I had managed to unpack a few boxes and set up my bed. The house was eerily quiet, but I chalked it up to being far from the city. I liked the silence. At least, that's what I told myself. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound. Faint, almost like someone whispering. At first, I thought it was the wind, until I remembered I had closed all the windows. The sound was coming from the hallway just outside my bedroom. Half asleep and annoyed, I got up and opened the door. The hallway stretched long and dark. The air felt colder out there, heavier somehow. I flipped the light switch. Nothing. The bulb had worked earlier. Now it just buzzed softly and stayed dark. "Great," I mumbled. I grabbed my phone for a flashlight and stepped into the hall. There was nothing there, just the creaking floorboards beneath my feet and the whisper of air. But the sound, it had stopped the moment I opened the door. Back in bed, I convinced myself it was old pipes or maybe my imagination. First night jitters. But just as I began to drift back to sleep, I heard it again. A soft scratching, like nails on wood. This time, it came from under the bed. My heart skipped. I froze, staring into the darkness, holding my breath. Every horror movie I'd ever seen told me not to look, but something inside me, the need to know, won out. I leaned over the edge of the bed slowly, phone light aimed underneath. Nothing, just dust and a few boxes. Relieved, I sat back up, and then the light flickered and died. My phone had been fully charged. I know it had. I stayed still, listening. No more scratching, no whispering, just silence again. Somehow, I fell asleep. When I woke, sunlight was pouring through the windows, and the house looked normal, peaceful even. I laughed at myself in the shower. "You're just being dramatic," I said aloud, trying to shake off the unease. But things didn't stay normal. Over the next few days, strange little things started happening. I'd leave a room and come back to find things moved. A chair out of place, a drawer left open, lights flickering. Once, I found a trail of muddy footprints in the hallway, small, like a child's, but I lived alone. I asked the neighbors if they knew anything about the house. Most of them were polite but distant. One woman, an elderly lady named Mrs. Calloway, pulled me aside as I was getting the mail. "You're in the old Morgan house," she said. "Did no one tell you?" "Tell me what?" Her face grew pale. "They had a daughter. Little Emma. She disappeared right out of that house, never found. Some folks think she ran away. Others think she never left. I felt cold all over. That was how long ago? About 10 years now, she said. After that, no one stayed in that house more than a few weeks. I wanted to leave right then and there, but I didn't want to believe in ghosts or curses or haunted houses. I told myself it was just rumors. Until that night. It started around midnight. I was reading in bed when I heard a soft giggle, a child's giggle. It came from the hallway. I froze. I don't know how long I sat there, heart thudding, before I worked up the courage to get out of bed. I opened the door. There she was, a little girl, maybe 8 years old, standing at the far end of the hallway. Pale skin, long dark hair, wearing an old-fashioned nightgown. She looked wrong, like she was faded around the edges, not fully there. She smiled at me, then turned and walked toward the staircase. I followed her. Stupid, I know, but something about her compelled me. I felt like I had no control over my feet. She walked down into the basement. The door creaked open on its own. I stood at the top of the stairs. "Emma?" I whispered. She looked up at me from the shadows, and for a moment her face twisted. Her mouth stretched too wide, her eyes too dark. A flash of something inhuman. Then she was gone. The lights flickered and went out. The door slammed shut behind me, locking me out or in. I ran back to my room, locked the door, and didn't sleep at all. Just sat with the light on, every sound magnified, every shadow a threat. The next day, I packed a bag and left. I didn't care about the mortgage or the investment. I didn't even go back for my things. I don't know what I saw. I don't want to know. But the house on Wisteria Lane, it's still there, empty again, waiting. And sometimes, when I pass by, I swear I hear giggling through the walls. When I bought the house, I was just looking for peace. After the divorce and my mother's passing, I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere new. The house wasn't perfect, but it had charm. Old wooden floors, creaky stairs, ivy climbing the outside walls, and a slightly overgrown garden I intended to fix. It was quiet. Too quiet. The first night I heard it, a faint scratching like nails lightly raking wood from beneath the floorboards. I told myself it was just the house settling, or maybe a mouse. But it wasn't. The scratching returned the next night, then the next, always after midnight. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like something or someone was trying to get out. By the fourth night, the scratching was louder. I lay in bed with the covers pulled up to my chin when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps pacing beneath the floor. That's when I knew something was wrong. I got up and started searching the house. I hadn't explored every corner yet, especially not the basement. Behind the kitchen, I found an old wooden door, half covered by a shelf. It was locked with a rusted padlock, but I found the key in a drawer filled with useless junk. I opened the door and descended the narrow stairs, flashlight in hand. The air was damp and cold. The basement looked untouched for years, dust floating like mist in the beam of my light. In one corner sat an old wooden table, and beside it a small trunk draped in a black cloth. I approached slowly. The trunk was locked, but old. I forced it open. Inside were strange items: a filthy rag doll, a cracked wooden comb, and a sealed envelope, yellow with age. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single note. "Don't turn off the light, please." Just as I read it, I heard it, a soft giggle right behind me. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand. No one. The beam of light flickered. I smacked the flashlight, trying to keep it alive. Then came the sound again, the scratching, this time directly under my feet. I ran. I slammed the basement door and shoved a chair under the knob. That night, I didn't sleep. At exactly 3 a.m., the power went out. The house exhaled a long breath. Then, silence. I reached for my phone. The screen lit for a second, 1% black. And then the footsteps returned, this time upstairs, and they were dragging something. Something heavy, scraping against the floor. Then tap, tap, tap on my bedroom door. I didn't move. I sat on the floor, clutching a screwdriver, staring at the doorknob, waiting for it to turn. But it didn't. Not that night. When dawn finally broke, I opened the door. There were muddy footprints, small ones, leading from the basement door to my bedroom, then vanishing into nothing. I didn't think twice. I listed the house for sale that same day. I didn't care about the money. I didn't want peace anymore. I wanted safety. As I packed the last box into my car, I noticed something on the front porch. It was the same rag doll from the trunk, only now its mouth had been sewn shut, and stuck in its tiny stitched hands was a torn piece of paper. It read, "You turned off the light." I wasn't supposed to be there alone. The plan was to move in with my fiancé next week, after the movers were done. But curiosity got the best of me. I wanted to spend one quiet night in our new home, our dream house, a charming 2-story place tucked away in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The air inside smelled of fresh paint and new wood. The rooms were echoey and hollow, with only a few boxes scattered around. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the staircase, and took it all in. For once in my life, I felt like things were finally falling into place. Then I noticed it. A mirror in the upstairs hallway. I didn't remember seeing it during the tours or while moving things in. It was old, too old for this place. Its wooden frame was blackened and carved with strange, uneven symbols. The glass was slightly foggy,
like it hadn't been cleaned in decades. I stared at it for a moment, and it stared back. I don't know how else to say it. It felt like the mirror was watching me. Not my reflection. It, the mirror. I shook it off, blaming my nerves. I'd been through a lot lately. Losing my job, the rushed engagement, the move. Maybe I just needed sleep. That night, I lay in my sleeping bag on the bedroom floor. The house creaked and groaned, as old houses do. I left the hallway light on, just in case. At exactly 2:12 a.m., I woke up gasping. I'd heard something. It came from the hallway. A soft tap, then another, as if someone or something was walking barefoot, slowly. I sat up and looked toward the open bedroom door. And that's when I saw her. A figure, tall and thin, standing directly in front of the hallway mirror. Pale skin, long dark hair covering her face, her head tilted slightly to the left. She wasn't reflected in the glass. She was standing outside the mirror, but her reflection wasn't there. I blinked, and she was gone, just like that. I rushed to the hallway. Nothing. The mirror showed only me, trembling, wide-eyed, pale. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I tried to remove the mirror. I figured it belonged to the previous owner and was left behind. But when I grabbed the edges to lift it, it didn't move. I mean it, not even a wiggle, like it was fused to the wall. And when I touched the glass, it was warm, not like room temperature warm, but body warm, alive. Later that day, I called my fiancé. He laughed it off, said I was overthinking things and probably watched one too many horror movies. He promised to come by tomorrow night. I couldn't wait that long. That evening, the atmosphere shifted. The house felt heavier. The lights flickered more than once, even though the weather was calm. Doors creaked open on their own, even ones I had locked. And that night, she came back. 2:12 a.m. like before. This time, she stepped forward, out of the mirror. Her reflection still didn't follow. She walked slowly down the hallway toward my room. I shut the door and pushed a box against it, heart pounding.
I heard her nails drag along the wall as she passed. I swear I could hear her breathing. Shallow, wet breaths, like someone choking. Then, knock, knock on my bedroom door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Eventually, the sound faded, and I passed out from fear. By morning, there were scratches on the outside of the door, long, deep gouges like something had clawed it during the night. I left the house. I went straight to a nearby motel and didn't return for 2 days. When I did, my fiancé was there waiting for me. He looked at me like I was crazy, until he saw it, the mirror. His first words were, "That wasn't here before?" Exactly. We tried to cover it with a sheet. The sheet burned. I watched the fabric smoke and curl on its own. We contacted the previous owner. She hung up the second we mentioned the mirror. Later, we found an old newspaper article wedged in the attic floorboards, yellowed, fragile. It mentioned a murder-suicide in the house 30 years ago.
A woman, abandoned by her fiancé, had hung herself in the hallway, next to the mirror. She carved her name into the wood. I hadn't noticed it before, but now I saw it etched just below the frame. Elena, 2:12 a.m. We moved out that same week. The house was sold again months later. But sometimes, when I wake up at night, no matter where I am, the clock reads 2:12, and I hear a faint knocking.
We bought the house because it was quiet. Too quiet, in fact. Nestled at the end of a wooded cul-de-sac, the place felt like it had been plucked out of time. No neighbors, no streetlights, just tall pine trees, silence, and the distant sound of wind pushing through leaves like whispers. My wife, Melissa, loved it instantly. I didn't. It wasn't the look of the house. It was beautiful. It was the feeling. You know that sense when you walk into a room and your stomach tightens before you can explain why? Yeah, that. The unease began the first night. We were unpacking boxes when I heard it. A voice, faint, garbled, coming from inside the vent. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I thought it was a neighbor's TV echoing through the woods. But there were no neighbors, and the vents were sealed, new. "Melissa," I said, keeping my tone casual, "did you hear that?" She didn't. She just smiled, kissed my cheek, and kept unboxing mugs. But I kept hearing it, night after night, at 1:33 a.m. without fail. A soft whisper, like a woman speaking through water. I'd press my ear against the vent cover and hold my breath, trying to make out the words. Most of the time, it was unintelligible. But once, I heard it clearly. "He's still here." That was the first time I checked the attic. It was empty, dusty, and smelled like mold and thyme. But near one of the old air ducts, scratched into the wooden floorboard, were letters, deep and angry. "Get out." I didn't tell Melissa, not because I wanted to hide it, but because something told me not to, like the house was watching, listening. Then the dreams started. Every night I was crawling through the vents, twisting metal passages, claustrophobic, endless. I wasn't alone in there. I could hear breathing, sometimes whispers right behind me, sometimes laughing. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, only to find the vent cover near our bed cracked open, screws on the floor. I started sealing them with duct tape, bolting them down. Didn't matter. They always opened again. One night, Melissa finally heard it. She sat up in bed, pale as chalk, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded slowly. The whisper was louder now, coming from every vent in the house. It wasn't one voice anymore. It was several, layers of speech, overlapping, murmuring things I couldn't bear to repeat. Some of them were screaming, others were laughing, a baby crying, a woman begging. I tried to leave. I packed our car and told Melissa we were going to a hotel. But when we reached the end of the driveway, the road was gone. I mean, gone. Just trees, thick, endless forest where the road had been just hours before. Melissa screamed. We backed up, parked, called for help. No signal. We were trapped. That night, I took a crowbar and ripped off the vent cover in the hallway. I was done. I needed to see what was inside. What I saw wasn't a duct. It was a tunnel, narrow, fleshy,
like something organic. And far, far down at the end, eyes. Glowing red, unblinking, and a smile that stretched too far, filled with too many teeth. Then I heard it, clearer than ever. You moved into me. I slammed the cover shut. Melissa and I don't talk much anymore. She stays in the bedroom, lights always on. I sleep in the living room with the TV on max volume just to drown out the voices in the vents. We can't leave. The house won't let us. And the whispers are getting louder. Tonight is the first time they said my name.